California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Today we're joined by Ken Paxton. He is a homeless policy advisor to Josie Gonzalez. She is a member of the Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County, and she represents very significant portions of the city of San Bernardino. And we know, sir, that the city of San Bernardino has suffered dramatically over the last few years, not just as a result of an economic downturn in the region, but the city itself has gone bankrupt, and so I'm sure you're very busy. Very, very busy.
Yes, sir, I am. The city of San Bernardino, when we did the point-in-time count for homelessness, which is a mandate from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, when we did that in 2013, 39% of our total homeless population was found in the city of San Bernardino. Which
seems high, because I have to think, so I understand the county is about 2 million and the city is about 200,000.
About 200,000.
So that's 10% live in the city, yet almost 40% of your homeless for the entire county are in the city.
Right.
That's got to be crushing, not only for you as a policy advisor, but as a resident yourself. I mean, this is a city you know and love.
It's true.
This is your home.
And it's sort of an artifact when you look at the city of San Bernardino and census data. It is the second poorest city in the nation, for folks in poverty. In fact, when you take a look at just welfare numbers, as of this time last year, 54% of the city's population were on some sort of public assistance. So, translated, any given day, those folks might fall into homelessness.
And so let's talk about what's coming up. I know every 2 years, the federal government requires, is it municipalities or counties?
Well, any jurisdiction, county or city, that receives federal funds to address the homeless issue must do a point-in-time count. And that is a mandate of HUD, Housing and Urban Development.
Sure.
And those numbers are significant because they translate into federal dollars for us to implement what we call evidence-based practice to get folks off the street permanently.
And Ken, what's interesting to me is how the count is done. Literally, you hire individuals to go out and count people. Well, it's not a sampling per se, or it's a large sampling.
Well, it is indeed a point-in-time count on that cold January day when we do it. Unfortunately, we don't hire people. We don't have the money to do that, so we rely on volunteers.
That's what I remember, yes.
We have to recruit volunteers.
I remember that.
Good folks in the community, could be nonprofits, churches.
I've seen ads for that.
Who are interested in going out on that day, engaging the homeless, surveying them. And homelessness is a complex issue because what we find when we count the homeless, we'll have vets with post-traumatic stress, folks with mental health disorders or substance abuse issues.
I have to ask, you know this, our viewers probably do, the largest geographic county in the United States of America, San Bernardino.
21,000 square miles.
How do you do your point-in-time homeless count?
Well, we work heavily with public safety, law enforcement, and we map the entire county by way of what we call green zones, which is another way of saying hot spots.
Got it.
So it could be homeless encampments, it could be particular parks, alleyways where these folks, spend their nights. And so we take sort of a scientific mapping approach. So when we go out there, we know where we're going to find the homeless.
So is it a sampling and you extrapolate? As I understand it, it's more than just a sampling.
It is a sampling and it is an extrapolation. We
That's
also
a large sample.
So we look at folks in the street on that day. We also look at folks in shelter and individuals in transitional housing. So extrapolated, we know the problem is probably much bigger than that count on that day. And of course, the feds factor that in when we receive our funding.
So, for example, in 2013, the count for chronic homelessness in San Bernardino County, 2,321.
Yes.
Is that an actual number you counted, 2,321, or was that an extrapolation?
Correct, actual number. And those folks...
That seems low to me.
Yeah, and it is. It is low. And those folks are considered chronically homeless, which means they've been in the street for a year or more, or they've had 4 episodes of homelessness in the last 3 years.
So how is it that this number is as low as it is, given 2013, the recession still is, we're still at least in the hangover of the recession? Was it just because this county is so large, there was an undercount, or what do you...
Well, those 2,300 folks are what you would call the face of homelessness. Those are the folks that people see when they go to the grocery store. They see them walking down the street. It's a much bigger issue especially when you start to talk about children.
And let's talk about children, because that number is nothing short of devastating.
It is.
There's a different way to classify homelessness amongst school-aged children. I'm familiar with this law. I think it was passed in the 70s or McKinney-Vento. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell us about the McKinney-Vento count.
Well, the McKinney-Vento definition, federal definition, basically are folks who have no permanent residence any given night.
Right.
So you have the chronic folks who have been in the street a long time, and the kids are considered under McKinney-Vento having no permanent home. 33,000 plus children in our county. That's 8% of our student population, and those children are identified by our school districts. So we know that's a much more valid count, because by definition, every school district in the county has to identify those kids and provide services to those kids.
And what do you do with that information? I mean, to have almost 34,000 kids, this was a couple academic years ago, that don't have a permanent home. I mean, I know that McKinney-Vento gives them special, I'm not saying this pejoratively, but special rights and privileges. I mean, it tries to protect them, but at a certain level, I got to think the dropout rate is dramatic.
Well, it is, and when you take a look at the trajectory for those kids and the sort of the everyday trauma, the uncertainty of being homeless with their mom and dad, the helplessness and hopelessness that many of those parents have, because they know that any given night they may be in the street with their children.
Right.
Most of the time through no fault of their own, just because of poverty, lack of jobs, lack of education. So it's all about partnership. My boss, Supervisor Gonzalez, started the San Bernardino County Homeless Partnership in 2007. So through that partnership, it's first responders like law enforcement who encounter those chronic homeless, us working with the Housing Authority to develop more housing for families with kids, working with the Veterans Administration, because when we did that count in 2013, 11% of those homeless folks were vets who had been in Afghanistan or Iraq, had post-traumatic stress.
And they can access unique services that those that did not serve could not access.
Yes, and that's an artifact of the count. That's why when we go out in the street in January, we try to determine if someone's mentally ill, if they're a veteran, if it's a family with kids, because each one of those discrete data elements then points to resources that we can utilize for those homeless folks.
So if in 2013 the number was around 2,300, what do you anticipate for this upcoming count?
We hope it's lower.
Although there's a perverse incentive.
There is.
Because you want more, so you get more funding, not in a kind of sinister way, but then you can offer more services.
Well, yes and no. Because, as I said, the federal money is dependent on the count, but we use those funds for evidence-based practice. There's the strategy we're trying to utilize is called Housing First. So in years past, and being an old social worker, you know, the first thing you want to do is assess somebody as to why they're homeless. Housing First is about getting them off the street into housing.
Right.
And so those federal funds we receive, many jurisdictions like City of San Bernardino receive their own what they call emergency solution grant funds. One of the things we're working on through the supervisor's office is a more coordinated collaborative effort with the school districts, with our nonprofit homeless providers, with our cities, to leverage and utilize just not the federal funds, but state funds, educational funds,
nonprofits,
so we can take a holistic approach to addressing the homeless issue and getting folks the services they need.
Well, you do this. I'd love for you to come back after the count, and once you've analyzed it, deciphered it, and give us a sense of what you learned, because you know, the early part of this decade has been challenging when you look at homelessness, and I would hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel for so many of these folks.
There are.
And I know that the supervisor is very lucky to have you focused on the issue. His name is Ken Paxton. He is a homeless policy advisor to San Bernardino County Supervisor Josie Gonzalez. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.